Hi Flyers, Eric Mueller here with MilePoint TV, and I'm very excited today to be sitting down with Chris Guillebeau, author, blogger, world traveler, of course. How are you doing today, Chris?
I'm great.
Cool. There's so much I want to talk to you about, and I want to start right off by talking about your big, hairy, audacious goal you set for yourself 7 or 8 years ago to visit every country in the world. How many countries are we talking about?
There are 193 countries in the world, according to the UN. So there's some different standards, but I use the UN standard just to be simple. So 193, and I just wrapped it up as of right now 3 weeks ago.
Wow, that's fantastic. I can't even imagine how you started that. Tell me a little bit about the genesis of that.
You know, I always loved travel. That's how it started, just like it starts for a lot of people. I lived overseas in West Africa for about 4 years on a hospital ship, and I had some really great experiences just traveling in the region. Then I moved back to the States and kind of kept traveling whenever I had a break. And I'd been to about 50 countries, and I kind of counted it up, and I was like, this is kind of fun. I also liked goal setting, so I kind of merged like the travel and the goal setting. I was like, I want to go to 100 countries. You know, that was the first goal.
Okay. So so you had already done 50, and then you said, well, let's go to 100.
Yeah, 50-ish, you know, and then so then it was like, what's it like to go to 100 countries? How much is it going to cost? How much time is it going to take? I started working towards the goal. As I got closer to it, I realized like it's not that big of a goal to just go to 100 countries, because you can pick and choose which countries. You know, you can go to like the easy countries, or you can like rack up a bunch of countries in a row, you know, in Europe or the Caribbean or something. So that's when I just said, let's go to every single country in the world.
Wow, okay. So you said every single country, you made a list, you've got 193 now. Right. How long did it take in total to do that? So starting from the beginning.
So it depends on how you count it. I mean, I say it's like it's an 11-year journey. You know, from when I first went to West Africa to when I finished up in Norway.
You know, it's interesting you said that you could pick and choose the easy countries. So I understand that. We're talking about Europe, it's easy to get around, like you said, the Caribbean. What about some of the harder countries? Like, I'd love to hear about how hard it was to get to some of the former Soviet republics, for example, or some of the countries in the Middle East.
You know, well, fortunately, because I lived in West Africa first, here's what was funny. My first, international experiences were in very difficult countries. You know, and I was living in this region where there's very limited flights. Sometimes the countries are at war with one another. If they're not at war, they don't like each other. So you can't often fly between the two of them. You have to fly to like a third country to get there. You know, there's
so
like
lots of
there's lots of corruption and things, corruption and things. You know, I had to take lots of like helicopters and UN flights and things. So anyway, the point is I kind of started with that. So then when I started traveling later, I expected everything to be like that, and it was actually much easier.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
It's actually like, oh, you're not actually asked for a bribe everywhere you go. You know.
That's not the standard way of getting around.
If your flight is canceled, there's often another flight, you know, that you can take, and it's okay. So yeah, some of the former Soviet republics, those are difficult. The visa process is difficult. In some cases, you have to pay for a guide. Like you have to go on a sponsored, trip, even if it's just you.
Okay.
You have to basically pay for a guide and pay for a handler and all that. So it can be expensive, but there's usually a way to do it. You know, that's the point. Is like when you start breaking it down, there's always a way to get to Tajikistan, or to Kyrgyzstan, or wherever you want to go. There's always a way.
All the stands. You've been to all the stands now.
Yeah, 5 or 6 stands, I think. Yeah.
6 stands. Okay, fantastic. Now, when you're making these trips, you mentioned visa process. I think I've heard you mention that sometimes that wasn't always easy. Of course, when I think of visa, I think of again the easy country. Maybe going to China, I mail my passport away, I get it back in a couple of weeks. There's my visa, I pay my fee, I'm done. It's easy. They process 1 million of them. But what about some of these smaller countries with these higher requirements?
Yeah, no, I definitely had some problems with that. And at midpoint in the journey, I got a second passport, a duplicate U.S. passport. That would help a bit with this because one of the biggest problems was the mailing time. Because I'm always traveling. I'm traveling like 2 weeks out of every month in general. So if my passport is out, in Washington D.C., I can't travel during that time.
Sure.
I often need to apply for more than one visa at once. So that was a big part of the biggest logistical challenge was the visa process. But I had lots of problems, along the way where I couldn't get a visa and I decided to go anyway. In some cases.
Really? So you said, I've got an airplane, a ticket already? You've got your ticket.
Right.
The visa didn't come through in time, or you weren't able to get it, and you said, the heck with it. I mean, I didn't even know they let you board a plane in that case.
Well, you see, you usually have to be creative, right? So I'm a big fan of paperwork. I'm a big fan of like printing some stuff out. Like here's my itinerary, here's my hotel reservation.
Right.
Here's a hotel down the street that I'm not actually staying at, but it's another piece of paper. When I went to Pakistan, it was like I did some research, and there's like a Pakistani American Friendship Association. So I go to their website, I print out their website. Like
that's
just like overwhelm people with paperwork. And I learned this from working in West Africa because in developing countries. People are really big on paperwork, and stuff. So that helped. But I should be clear that I'm not trying to go to all these countries without visas. Like I definitely did everything I could, to get the necessary permission. And it was a few cases where I didn't have it, and I just thought I don't necessarily know what's going to happen on the other side, but I need to try. I need to do everything I can, to accomplish this goal. And if I fail, it's okay. But I'm going to feel bad if I don't try.
Right. Well, I think, that's an important distinction. I think you make every effort, you want to follow the rules, you want to do it the way the country wants you to do it to enter the country. So now what happens? It doesn't work, you've got your stack of paperwork. My boyfriend always says the person with the biggest file always wins.
Right,
so I feel
exactly.
like this is sort of that strategy.
Yeah, I'm just like rolling
You've
it.
got your paperwork, and then what happens when you show up at immigration, for example? You get on the plane, they get you there.
Right. So
Passport
there was
visa, please.
one example where it didn't work out so well.
Okay.
It worked out in Pakistan okay. It worked out in Saudi Arabia okay. Probably
Pakistan, Saudi Arabia, no problem. You talked your way in.
Yep.
Brilliant.
Yeah, Pakistan or Saudi Arabia was weird because they let me into Riyadh, but they assigned me like this guy to look up on me, like check up on me, and like he would call my hotel room every 30 minutes. You know, Mr. Chris, are you still there? Yes, I'm still here. You know, he's like basically checking up on me for the whole 3 days I was there. You know,
that almost sounds like more personal service than.
Yeah, I suppose. I don't think he actually wanted to help. I don't think I could have ordered like a glass of orange juice. You know, can you bring me up some sparkling water?
I'm trying to find a nice restaurant in the neighborhood.
Yeah, I don't think so. No. Right. So there's only one case that it really didn't work, and that was in Eritrea. Okay. I tried over and over. I had paid for my visa multiple times at the embassy in DC, and they just never responded. And I used a service, and they never. And Eritrea and Ethiopia have like a long-standing conflict, and the U.S. supports Ethiopia, so they basically just do not want American travelers to go there. So I did. I bought my ticket. I went there, and I ended up being deported after I had stayed through the entire night in immigration. I was kind of locked up, and I kept trying everything I could. But I got like this tour of the airport. They like marched me around outside, and I finally got put on a plane to go back to Cairo. 8 hours later or something in the morning. So that was my only like really bad experience at actually being deported. It was a good story.
And it's a great story. And at the end of the day, you got 8 hours in Eritrea.
I did, and so I asked my readers. I was like, what do I do about this? Like, do I count this or not? Because I've tried to pursue this quest with integrity. Fortunately, the majority of readers said, you actually had, in some ways, maybe a more authentic or more interesting experience than you would have had if you just like got to go in and stay at the hotel for a couple of days and you went back.
Certainly,
it's actually you had quite a thing. So fortunately, my readers said it counts.
Okay, got it.
I let them decide.
So that was, we're going to call that 8 hours in Eritrea, call it that. The idea of visiting all these countries, I'm curious, towards the last couple of years, obviously you planned everything out. Did it get faster and faster? Would you sort of look at the schedule and go, oh, okay, now I'm going to spend a day in each country because I've got to get so many in before the deadline?
Yeah,
or
that's a good
question. Did everything work out?
Everything did work out. There were definitely some changes. I mean, it definitely got more difficult. It gets progressively difficult because you run out of those easy countries.
Right.
And in the beginning, I could take a trip to a region I'd never been to before and get like 4 or 5 countries, in 2 weeks or something,
Sure, that makes sense.
But definitely not towards the end. I mean, definitely towards the end, it's like I'm flying all the way around the world or something to get to Guinea-Bissau, my remaining country in Africa,
Right.
I'm flying all the way to the South Pacific, to Fiji, and then 3 hours more to Tuvalu or Kiribati, my 2 last countries in the South Pacific. So definitely like more process, towards the end. And then also the stakes are higher too, because sometimes in the beginning something would go wrong and I'd kind of reroute. And I'd go somewhere else. Like, oh, it's not going to work out to go there, but I've got this other place I can go to instead. But
I still get a new country out
Right,
of it.
but I didn't have that luxury at the end. At the end, it's like, this has to work, otherwise...
Right, that's where I've got to be. I've been everywhere around it.
Right. So it was kind of depressing. There were a couple times that I would get, halfway around the world or something and then have to abandon.
Pull the plug on that and,
so that wasn't
I've got
so
to
fun.
rework my spreadsheet.
Yep,
And
that happened.
Wow. What was the hardest country to sort out? I mean, obviously there were the places where the visa was a problem and thing, but even where everything sort of worked out, you got your visa, you got there, maybe the longest travel or...
The hardest country.
Sort of the most difficult circumstances.
Yeah, I guess it all depends on how you measure it, right?
Right.
I do remember, the longest bus journey I ever took.
Bus journey.
Ended up being about 32 hours straight. This is in East Africa.
Did you get the upgrade to first class on that?
There was no upgrade. There's a funny story though. I went from Kampala, Uganda to Dar es Salaam, Tanzania, all the way through Kenya. So those countries are not, tremendously difficult to travel in, but 32 hours on a bus straight, it was definitely, by the time I arrived, I was ready to arrive. But the funny story about the upgrade is, right when I boarded the bus, they actually gave out a little towel, and I was like, that's nice. Then they gave out a bottle, like a can of soft drink, like a Sprite or a Fanta or something, it's like a few minutes later. Then 30 minutes later, they gave out ice cream. They're like, this is going to be all right.
This is great.
The rest of the trip, 31 and a half hours, nothing.
You didn't save your ice cream for later in the
apparently
trip?
I should have. So the lesson is, if you board this bus in East Africa, whatever you get in the beginning, that's what you get.
Hang on to that, pack a lot of snacks.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. It's funny, now that we're actually touching on that, I'm curious, when you were doing these trips, how would you pack? How much stuff would you bring?
Oh, carry on only. Never checked a bag unless I've been forced, to check a bag, from a random airline or something.
I can imagine that would be the worst idea when you're transferring and changing.
Yeah, no, I would never do that. I mean, I have a decent sized rollerboard, so I can fit a lot in it, but I can go for 2 weeks on that. The biggest thing is my running shoes. I try to run in a lot of these different countries, and that probably takes up the biggest amount of space. But anybody who watches MilePoint probably knows that it's actually less stressful to take less stuff. I believe it's actually the question people always have is like, how can you do this without bringing a suitcase? I'm like, it's more difficult to bring a suitcase.
Yeah, I would say so.
It's more difficult. You got to be worried about it. You got to like carry it.
Then.
You got to be like rolling it down the street and stuff. It's much easier to just take less.
You just have like a backpack?
No, not a backpack. I mean, I've got the rollerboard.
Rollerboard.
I've got the rollerboard. I've got a laptop bag.
Okay. Got it. But you're right with that anywhere in the world.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm curious about what you would do differently.
Oh, wow. Yeah. What I would do differently.
What you would do differently. And again, I know this is one of those questions where it depends on how you measure it.
Right.
How far back are we talking, that kind of thing. But let's say, let's look back maybe 7 or 8 years ago when you said, okay, I'm going to officially say 193 countries, all of them, this is it, this is the plan, I'm going to work it out forward from here. Would you reorganize things differently? Would you?
I don't know if I would, actually.
Really?
I mean, I'm honestly thinking about this question. And I think, you go through this process, you gain a lot of knowledge along the way.
Sure.
So there's no doubt if I, had the knowledge I, did now, if I could like start over or something, maybe I would do some things differently, but I also really don't have any regrets about how it's turned out. Like, I'm actually glad that it was an organic process for, quite a long time, and it began out of my love for travel, and so I don't know. I'm very happy with it. I mean, I'm glad it's worked out as it did. I mean, I didn't know if it would.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's an incredible goal that you set for yourself. And the idea, 193 countries, I was actually, as I was listening to you speak earlier and talk about all of this, I was thinking in my head, well, how many countries have I been to? And I maybe can get to 20, 25.
That's great. And it also gets easier. It gets, your confidence builds through experience. And, it wasn't until I had been to those 50 countries that I was like, what's it like to go to 100,
Sure. So, How did it change as you went? You said it gets easier, so.
In some ways it gets easier, in some ways maybe the challenge was to stay focused and to, because there was people often ask if there's like a moment of like you were just checking off a list, and I don't feel like that. I feel like that would be bad, but some countries were more enjoyable than others. I did have some bad experiences at times, but we're talking about an 11-year process, so I guess the other thing that changed is my engagement with people, because I'm a very introverted person, and I used to just kind of do my own thing. And
I have the hard time. You're just so outgoing now.
I'm a very introverted person. Yeah, absolutely. I definitely derive my energy by being by myself, and I used to be able to travel for 2 weeks without really, spending much time with people at all. And now, I have readers and a community everywhere, and that's good. It's actually been really good for me.
Sure.
But it is a big change.
I heard you speak earlier about some of your rules for travel, and I love your $10 rule. So I want people to hear that. Tell us about the $10 rule.
Well, I should say I don't have a lot of rules for travel. My main rule is like you should do what you want to do. You shouldn't let other people determine what you're traveling. But for myself,
your $10 rule, which I love, which I think everyone should adopt. But let's hear it.
So I was initially drawn to the world of miles and points because I'm kind of a frugal person, and miles and points were great because it allowed me to have experiences I wouldn't otherwise have. So that's great. And frugality is great for lots of things, but I think I was too frugal for a long time, and I didn't want to like buy a meal in the airport, for example, because it was like, I thought it was too expensive. I was like, it's a $9 sandwich.
I'm overpaying for this sandwich, right?
Right. So I was like, I'll show them. I'll be hungry the rest of the day, And it's like obviously you're only like defeating yourself, And then there's lots of times that I would be like lost in a city somewhere, and I didn't want to take a taxi. I'd be like pulling my bags, and it'd be pouring down rain, but I didn't want to take a taxi because it's too expensive, So that's obviously a fault. So I solved that problem by creating a $10 rule, which is if I'm traveling, there's something I can buy or pay for that will improve my life somehow. If it costs less than $10, I'm just going to do it. I'm not going to think about it. I'm not going to go through an emotional analysis of it. I'm just going to do it. And then once I started doing that, it made my life a lot better.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant rule. I've been in exactly that same situation. You know how it is. It's like, oh, I just want a bottle of water. Oh, it's $3.
Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Crazy.
I'm not going to spend $3. I'm going to be dehydrated for the rest of the day.
Exactly. And then I'm sitting in the taxi going, it was $3. What was I thinking? I really should have gotten that bottle of water when I got off the plane. I totally get that. I love that. Jumping back to to planning all the travel, was this more award tickets, or were you paying for your tickets?
All of the above.
I'm just curious, like the mechanics of doing it.
All of the above. A lot of awards tickets.
Okay.
I'm trying to think, maybe at least a third would be award tickets, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And then of the paid tickets, I did a lot of round the world tickets. I did a number of one world round the world.
Interesting. So you get all the stops along the way.
Yeah, up to 16 stops. I actually began when you could have up to 20 stopovers.
Okay.
Back when they had paper tickets.
Okay.
Now it's 16. So I did a lot of Star Alliance, a number of Star Alliance around the world, and then even more one world around the world.
You must have gotten really good at planning. I know setting up those around the world tickets is a
it's
big
a process.
You
It's a
must have gotten
process.
very good at it.
Yeah, but the pricing can be advantageous if you purchase from a different country and stuff. So I would begin a round the world ticket in South Africa, for example. Or in Jordan, or for a while it was actually Japan had a cheap price. So, because I'm always flying, I would have like a repositioning flight, and I would begin that around the world ticket, then I'd have an awards flight. So it was kind of convoluted.
Yeah.
But I used everything.
Boy, there's an enormous amount of strategy involved in this. Obviously it's not just making a list, but it's even more than I would have thought.
Yeah, well, like I said, I didn't have to figure out all the strategy in the beginning. I had to figure out, you know, how do I get to the next 5 countries?
Got it.
And how do I get to another 5 countries? But then, yes, the more you learn, definitely it became easier.
Yeah, and obviously as you get near the end and it gets a little tighter and tighter, and now you've got some really specific destinations, but by then you've done it so many times, you can hop, hop, hop and put it all together.
Yeah, also it's like easier when there's fewer options, because like to get to Tuvalu and Kiribati, 1 flight in a week, that's it. So you don't have to worry about like, should I do this, should I do that? Like you just got to buy that ticket and go, you know?
Well, of course, now the big question is, you've done the 193 countries, what's next?
You know, I plan to keep traveling. I plan to keep traveling and writing.
Are you going to set another travel goal similar to the one you just completed?
You know, I think I'm going to set some more goals, but I don't think it will be similar to what I've just done. Like some people are like, you should go to the moon. You know, you should like do the Richard Branson thing and pay $200,000 and go to space. I don't think it's going to be anything like that. It's not going to be going back to revisit all the countries in reverse order.
I think imagine.
Somebody else can do that. If anybody's watching, it's all you.
That's right.
No, I think my next goal will be more about community and different people that I connect with in different cities. So I have a new book coming out about quests next year, and it's not just about my own quest; it's about other people who kind of orient their lives around a quest. So I think the new goal is going to relate to that in some way.
Chris, you've written a number of books. I think of what you've written, my favorite thing is The Art of Nonconformity. It was your first book.
It was, thanks.
And the philosophy you espouse, The Art of Nonconformity, is brilliant. It's all about sort of doing your own thing. Can you talk to me a little bit about that? Because I think people need to hear about this. It's really great.
Sure. So the blog, The Art of Nonconformity, and the book, like the central message is you don't have to live your life the way other people expect you to.
Exactly.
You can do good things for yourself and for others at the same time. It's not a false choice. It's not a dichotomy.
Right.
And I'm just trying to kind of highlight, stories of people that are doing that in their own way, whether it's through travel or entrepreneurship or through the arts or through nonprofit or something like that. So I'm fortunate to connect with this, great community. Many of them are doing much better, bigger things than I am, and I don't think I'm a catalyst for it. I think I'm an amplifier, perhaps, of what they're doing. So that's what I'm hoping to do with the project.
Well, it's funny because doing that and giving back, like you just talked about, ties in so naturally with the frequent flyer community and with what we do at MilePoint. I mean, Randy Peterson especially really tries to always make everything that happens with MilePoint to have a charity component to it and to always give back. And of course, here at Frequent Traveler University, there's a lot of charity component to it as well.
Which is great. That's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, we're very lucky to be able to do what we do, and the community lucky to be able to travel the way we do. And it's nice to be able to think past, I hope my upgrade clears. Oh, what do you mean you've run out of my entree choice? I really wanted the chicken. It's nice sometimes to sort of break.
And we can all get into that. We can all do that. I mean, I've certainly had
the chicken is really good.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay. That's great. No, I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you said that. I think there's so many opportunities out there and so many possibilities, for all of us to do this. So I guess what I would, encourage people to do is think about how can you pursue those opportunities, how can you take advantage of them, you absolutely should, and also how can you contribute, and that's what people at MilePoint are doing, that's what people are doing here, so it's great.
I feel like part of your message is you've got to think a little bit bigger. But I like that has sort of two definitions. It's a message of you've got to think bigger for yourself. Maybe it's a big quest you're talking about. Maybe it's a special goal you're setting for yourself. Maybe it's your first international trip. But that's thinking a little bigger than where you've been, and it's thinking a little bigger about how can you give back. How is it not just about the next thing in front of you, and how is my situation going to be improved?
Sure. Well, I want to challenge people. Yeah. I want people to step it up. Like, if you got miles, what are you gonna do with them?
Exactly.
I don't want people to hoard their miles. I want them to earn as many miles as they can and then put them to good use.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because miles are a depreciating asset. They're a currency that just goes down over time. So yeah, I definitely want people to be challenged in life and travel and work and everything.
I love that a lot. Chris, if people want to keep up with you and what you're doing, where can they find you?
They can go to chrisguillebeau.com, which no one can ever spell.
That's
if you
right.
type something like that, you can see it, or Chris Guillebeau on Twitter, or read the $100 Startup, or anything you want.
That sounds great. Thank you so much for your time. Really a pleasure to talk to you. Yeah, absolutely.
Cheers.